Welcome back to another sewing tutorial. In this video, I will show you step by step how to sew the tie front vest. For those who don't know, I'm Julia, the creator of GENOW Patterns. If you love this vest and want to make your own, you can buy the pattern from my shop on Etsy, and I will leave a link in the description below. The first step is to cut out all the pattern pieces from the main fabric. You will need 2 pieces of the front panel, 1 piece of the back panel cut on the fold, 4 straps, and from the lining you will need 2 pieces of the lining front panel and 1 piece of the lining back panel cut on the fold. So let's start by applying the interfacing tape. Lay your front lining pieces flat with the wrong side facing up. Make sure that front panels of your garment are aligned correctly with the pattern. Place a straight grain interfacing tape with the fusible side onto the wrong side of the lining. Align it with the neckline and front open edge. Ensure that the edges of the interfacing tape and fabric match up. To fuse the interfacing, use a hot iron with no steam. Applying firm and even pressure, moving the iron gently back and forth until the interfacing tape firmly attaches to the fabric. It's crucial not to stretch the fabric when fusing the interfacing tape. Instead, adjust the tape to fit the panel accurately. Once the interfacing tape is securely fused, you can trim any excess interfacing that extends beyond the fabric edges. Now let's move on to the darts. Fold the main fabric along the marked middle line of the dart, bringing the right sides together. When pinning, be sure that the pins accurately follow the dart lines on both sides. Add an extra pin at the dart tips at the right angle to the fabric fold. You can choose to pin the darts separately for the main fabric and then for the lining, or do them all together. Here you can see that I pinned the darts for both the main fabric and the lining. Begin sewing with a straight stitch at the standard length of 2.5 mm from the widest part of the dart, which is the outer edge. Sew inwards towards the dart's point. When working on darts, it's crucial not to sew in a straight line, as it will create a shape that doesn't follow your body's contours. Instead, as you proceed, gently curve the stitching to match your desired curve lane. When it's time to remove pins during sewing, take a moment to pause, leave the needle down in the fabric, and then carefully extract that pin. Adjust the stitch length to 1.5 to 2 mm while continuing to stitch off the edge. Avoid backstitching when you reach the end of the dart point. Instead, leave a long tail of threads. To secure the threads at the end of the dart, carefully knot the tail threads, ensuring not to pull the knot too tight to prevent fabric puckering. Repeat the steps for other darts. Here you can see that all 4 darts have been sewn, and now it's time to press them with an iron. Start by ironing the wrong side of the fabric from the dart's endpoint to the outer edge. Make sure that dart's edge lines up with the outer edge. Then iron the right side of the fabric using a cloth or fabric as a buffer between the garment and the iron. Place the back panel onto the front panel of the main fabric, aligning the arm edges with the right sides facing each other, and pin them in place securely. Sew with a 1 cm seam allowance. Now press the seams towards the back or open. Repeat the steps for the lining. Now we'll move on to preparing the straps. Fold the straps in half lengthways with right sides facing, aligning the long edges, and press them. Sew along the long edge of each fabric strap, leaving the ends open, so approximately 8 mm from the edge to ensure a secure and flexible seam, creating a tube-like shape for the tie-ups. Trim away the excess seam allowance, then carefully turn each fabric tube right side out using a turning tool or a safety pin. Push the fabric through the tube until it's completely turned. Press the straps flat, ensuring the seam is centered along one side. The side where the seam is visible will be considered the wrong side, while the opposite side where no seam is visible will be the right side. Now locate the placement notches for the straps on the center edge of the front panel of the main fabric. Place the fabric straps between the notches with the right side spacing. Pin the ends of each fabric tube horizontally in place. Stitch the pinned ends of each strap onto the main fabric of the vest, either by hand or using a sewing machine, ensuring to sew close to the edge. Once you have sewn your straps, check if they match on both sides of the center edges. Repin the straps horizontally, ensuring they are in the proper direction for sewing. Keep your outer vest with the right side facing up. Then place the lining on top of the outer vest with the right sides together. Align the shoulder seams, neckline and front center edge and peel edges accordingly. Once the lining is in place, hold each strap horizontally, remove the pin and then repin it at the top to secure the strap in place. Stitch around the edge with a 1 cm seam allowance, ensuring the straps stay in place and don't shift incorrectly during sewing. Turn the lining to the right side and understitch, ensuring to cut the seam allowance. Start stitching from 1.5 to 2 cm above the bottom edge of the front center. Stitch approximately 1 mm from the edge of the lining. Carefully press the neckline and garment opening edges. Turn the lining inside out again. Lay your bodice flat with the main fabric facing up. Align the lining and main fabric armholes with the right sides together, then pin them in place. Sew along the armhole seam using a 1 cm seam allowance. Now clip around the armhole without cutting through the stitching line. Clipping the seam allowance during sewing involves making small notches on the inside of the seam allowance to release tension along curves. Now pull the entire garment right side out through the shoulder channel. Insert your hand from one side of the channel, grab the fabric from the other side and pull it through. Press the armhole from the lining, making sure the seam is centered on the inside of the garment. Fold the body so that the side seams are aligned with the right sides together. Start by aligning the armhole seam, ensuring that the armhole seam of the main fabric perfectly matches with the armhole lining, and place the seam allowance of the armhole towards the lining. Then match the front bodies to the back bodies and the front lining to the back lining. Sew the entire side seam with a 1 cm seam allowance, stitching continuously from the lining to the main fabric bodice. Press the seam towards the back or open. Flip the fabric inside out, ensuring the right sides of the lining and main fabric are together, aligning the bottom edges. Match up the front and seam lines. Now identify the center back line, then measure and mark 4 cm from each side, totaling you should have 8 cm. This gap will assist in flipping the garment inside out later. Pin the bottom hem, leaving a gap. Make sure that the front seam allowance is directed towards the lining part of the garment. Sew the entire bottom hem with a 1 cm seam allowance. Start stitching from the front edge and continue until you reach the first point of the gap. Leave the gap open, then resume stitching from the second point of the gap until you reach the outer front edge. Remember to backstitch at the points where the gap starts and ends. Slide your hand into the opening, grab the fabric inside and carefully pull the vest through the gap to flip it right side out. Using a needle, push the corners towards the edge. Then press the entire bottom hem and with your fingers on needle bring the seam as close to the edge as you can. Make sure that the seam is centered on the inside of the garment, which is the lining part. To close the gap, use an invisible hand stitch. Begin where the machine stitching ended, hiding the knot inside one side of the gap. Take a small stitch on one side of the gap, then bring the needle across to the other side of the gap and take another small stitch. Continue stitching between sides, making smalls and pulling the thread tight to close the gap invisibly. Continue hand stitching along the gap, making sure to keep the stitching even and the tension consistent. Once you reach the end of the gap, tie a secure knot and hide the thread tail inside the fabric. Press the gap for the final finish. Fold the raw edges of the open ends of the strap inward by about 5 mm and press them. Hand stitch the open ends to create a clean hidden seam similar to the previous step. Press the tube for a final finish. And here is the final look of the vest. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and found it helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments or send me a message on Instagram. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more sewing tutorials and creative projects. Thanks for watching and happy sewing!